The year was 1871, and the Kansas sun had no mercy for the desperate. Heat shimmered off the iron tracks like ghosts rising from the earth, and the whistle of the departing train howled across the barren platform like a final insult. The woman standing alone in the dust didn't flinch. She didn't chase the smoke-blurred shadow of the locomotive or run weeping into the arms of someone who never came. She just stood there, back straight, chin high, though the weight of what had just happened must have been enough to crush most souls. Ellie Monroe clutched her carpet bag in one gloved hand, the other twisting around the worn hem of her traveling coat. She was 32 years old, a spinster by town parlor standards, a relic in a world where girls of 17 were married off before their blush faded. Her match, if you could call him that, had sent for her from 2 territories over, paid for the train fare, wrote in a tight, impersonal scrawl, asterisk if you're plain but sturdy and no hysterics, I'll take you. Asterisk his name was Milton Keller. She never saw his face. Never would. So boy at the depot spat tobacco juice and chuckled. Guess he took one look and bolted. The others joined in, and Ellie stood there, spine like tempered iron. Dust kicked up from a slow-moving horse nearby. It was the only sound besides the wind and the station master's hammer ticking against a post. The rider was tall in the saddle, wide-shouldered, wearing a trail coat stained with sweat and earth. His horse was a shaggy bay, and behind it trailed a pack mule and a heavy-wheeled cart stacked with feed sacks. He didn't seem to be in a hurry, didn't seem to care for the laughter. He dismounted with the lazy grace of a man used to miles and silence. Daniel Briggs didn't like town. The last time he'd been here was 6 months ago, and even then, it was only for salt and bullets. This time he came for a team of horses that hadn't yet arrived. So he waited, though patience was a thing he carried like an old wound. When he saw the woman standing alone, and the laughter directed her way, something twisted behind his ribs. Not pity, just a pull, like an itch that wouldn't settle. He led his horse past her slow, almost deliberate, but he didn't speak. Neither did she. Their eyes met. Hers a flinty blue, cool and alert. She didn't blink. He liked that. You waiting for someone? He asked, finally. I was. He studied her a beat longer. He'd change his mind. It seems so. He nodded once, like that answered everything. In a way it did. She looked away then, toward the horizon, as if trying to spot a new future out there in the vast, unforgiving stretch of prairie. I've got a place about a day's ride west, he said, not looking at her. A ranch. Small. Cattle mostly. She didn't respond. Not easy country, he added. Her voice, when it came, was dry as the wind. No country worth surviving ever is. That made him smile, barely. It was more a twitch of the mouth, the kind of expression that hadn't visited his face in 2 years, not since Sarah died. She'd gone in the second winter after their wedding, birthing a child that didn't make it either. After that, Daniel had nothing but land, work, and silence. That suited him just fine. He glanced toward the station. The laughter had stopped. The boys had wandered off, bored now that there was no more shame to gawk at. You plan to stay here? He asked. She turned to face him, really looked at him now. Dust-streaked jaw, eyes like storm clouds, the kind of man who knew loss. She could see it on him. I don't have many plans left. He took that in, nodded again, as if confirming a private truth. Got room for another pair of hands, he said. Wouldn't be charity, but it'd be marriage. The proper kind. Preacher's still here. She stared at him, jaw tightening. You proposing something out of kindness or loneliness? He didn't flinch. Neither. I'm proposing something out of need. And what do you need? Someone who won't break easy. Someone who understands silence. For a moment, all she heard was the wind brushing the empty platform, the creak of leather from his horse shifting beside him. You always offer marriage to women you've known less than 5 minutes? She asked. Only the ones who look me in the eye without flinching. She didn't answer right away. Her heart was pounding, though her face gave no sign. This was madness. This was how girls got sold, tricked, used. But she wasn't a girl anymore. She had nothing left back east but a spinster aunt and a charity house that would take her in with sighs and whispers. Here, at least, there was choice. I want to be married in a church, she said at last. He nodded once. Station preacher'll do. And I keep my own things. My own name, until I choose otherwise. Fair. She stared at him hard, testing, watching for mockery or cruelty. She found neither. Just a tired man who'd seen hell and didn't mind company on the ride back. Then I'll do it, she said. The preacher was a round-shouldered man with too many stains on his collar, but he performed the ceremony without question, witnessed by no one but the station master and a curious old dog. Daniel offered her his name and a plain gold ring that had belonged to his mother. She accepted both with a calm that surprised even her. Afterward, he helped her into the wagon. He didn't touch her unless necessary. She noticed that. It wasn't awkwardness, it was restraint. The kind of respect that comes from knowing how close people can sit without ever truly meeting. The prairie yawned open before them as they rode, and the last sliver of sun dipped behind a line of distant hills. The road was nothing but ruts and hoof-beaten tracks. No houses, no voices, just wind and grass and the rustle of something unseen in the tall weeds. Ellie sat with her carpet bag on her lap, fingers curled around the handle, unsure whether to feel terrified or free. "How far is the ranch?" she asked. "Day and a half. Any other folks there?" "No, just me. Had a hand once. Old man died last spring. Then it's just us." He nodded again. "You regret it already?" He glanced at her. "You?" She shook her head. "I've regretted worse." They camped under an old cottonwood, the kind whose roots had cracked the soil for generations. Daniel built a fire with the casual confidence of habit, his hands sure even in the dimming light. He handed her coffee in a tin cup. She took it. Their hands didn't touch. "You lose someone?" she asked, surprising herself. He stirred the fire with a stick. "Wife. And a son. Or daughter. Never knew. I'm sorry." He didn't reply, just nodded once more, then leaned back against his saddle, hat over his eyes. Ellie stared into the fire, letting the silence stretch out between them. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was something like peace, raw, unfamiliar but real. By the second morning, they reached the ridge that overlooked his land. The ranch was a scattered patch of fencing, a barn missing a roof panel, and a weathered house crouched low against the wind like it had learned to survive through stubbornness alone. Beyond it, open range. Cattle dotted the horizon like spilled ink. "It's not much," Daniel said. "It's honest," she replied. He seemed to consider that a moment, then helped her down from the wagon. She stepped onto the hard-packed earth, lifting her skirts as the wind picked up. She could smell hay, manure, and something sharp, cedar, maybe, the scent of work and wear, the scent of a new life. Daniel turned to her, brushing dust from his coat. "You can have the upstairs room. I sleep on the porch most nights anyway." She looked at him. "You plan to treat me like a hired hand?" "No, but I also don't believe in pushing someone before they're ready." "And what if I never am?" He met her gaze. "Then we stay as we are. You help with the ranch. I'll keep you fed, safe. No strings beyond the ones we tied back there at the station." She studied him a long moment. "You're not what I expected. I don't think either of us is." She nodded, satisfied, and climbed the steps of the porch. The boards groaned under her weight, but held firm. Inside, the house was clean if sparse. A rifle leaned by the door, a cracked photograph on the mantel. She glanced at it, a woman with soft eyes, holding a baby that barely looked alive. She looked away. Outside, Daniel removed the horse's tack, his movements slow, precise. He didn't look back at the house. Ellie unpacked her things with deliberate slowness. Every dress, every comb, every stitched hem carried the echo of a past she no longer belonged to. She set them carefully in the drawer of a dresser with a missing knob. That night, they ate in silence at the small kitchen table, beans and cornbread, the kind that sticks in your throat if you're not careful. Afterward, he handed her a lantern and said, "Sleep well." She paused before going upstairs. "Good night, Mr. Briggs." He nodded, but didn't look up. "Good night, Mrs. Briggs." And so it began, not with love or passion or even hope, but with mutual silence and a solemn understanding. In a land as wild and wide as this, sometimes the strongest bonds are forged not in fire, but in the quiet decision to stay. The mornings came early on the Briggs ranch. Light crept across the prairie slow and golden, casting long shadows over fence posts and half-frozen troughs. The rooster didn't wait for permission, and neither did the work. Ellie rose with the dawn, her hands already toughening to the rhythm of the land. She fed the hens, mucked the stalls, boiled the coffee, and when she found a saddle in the barn that fit her just right, she rode the perimeter of the ranch like it had always belonged to her. Daniel noticed, though he never said as much. 3 weeks into their strange union, the distance between them still held. Like a taut rope, neither dared slacken. They worked side by side, ate facing the same direction, slept separated by walls and silence. Yet, in that silence, something stirred. A rhythm, a trust. He didn't speak of the wife he buried. She didn't ask, and she never spoke of the man who abandoned her on the platform, though at night, when she sat by the fire with her mending, she sometimes stared at nothing for too long. One evening, after a long day driving cattle in from the lower pasture, Daniel stood on the porch, a rifle cradled in his arms. The sun was gone, and the sky burned violet. Coyotes cried far off in the gullies. Ellie came up beside him, wiping her hands on her apron. "Trouble?" she asked. "Maybe." He pointed toward the tree lean where the wind moved the branches like breath. "Found tracks this morning. Booted ones. Could be nothing. Could be rustlers scouting." She narrowed her eyes. "You ever had trouble with rustlers before?" "Couple years back. Took 3 heifers and left 1 shot in the gut. Didn't bother the rest after that." "You shoot them?" He didn't answer. That night, she set the lantern low in the window upstairs. He noticed. It was the signal for riders. Someone's home and watching. Small things like that made her presence more than convenience. Made it feel like a partnership. 2 days later, trouble came. It was early, just after breakfast, and Daniel was patching the side gate when Ellie heard the hoofbeats. She stepped out of the house with a shotgun resting across her arms, apron still tied. A single rider approached, lean and grinning, with a pistol loose on his hip and the look of a man too used to taking. "Morning, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "Fine day for introductions, don't you think?" Daniel emerged from behind the gate, dusting his hands on his trousers. "You lost?" "Not particularly," the man said. "Name's Bram Cutter. Me and my boys are camped up along the creek, east of here. Figured I'd come meet the neighbors." "You're about 6 miles from anyone who'd call you that," Daniel said. Cutter laughed. "Well now, don't that make it all the more neighborly of me?" His eyes flicked to Ellie, lingering too long. She didn't flinch. "You out here alone, mister?" Daniel didn't answer, but Ellie stepped closer, lifting the shotgun slightly. "He's not alone. I'm his wife." That gave Cutter pause. His grin faded half an inch. "That's so," he said. "Well, lucky man." He touched the brim of his hat again, then turned his horse with a lazy pull of the reins. "You see anything strange up this way, give a holler. I'd hate to think of good folks getting caught up in bad business." They watched him ride off, silent until the dust settled. "I don't like him," Ellie said. "Neither do I. You think they'll come back?" Daniel nodded. "Soon as they think we're worth the trouble." That night, he moved his bedroll inside, into the downstairs hallway. Said it was for safety, but she saw the way his eyes scanned the windows, always measuring. The man was building a wall inside himself, brick by brick, and she couldn't blame him. The next week was tense as wire. Daniel rode out farther each day, checking fence lines, counting heads. Ellie learned to reload faster, kept a shotgun by the door, a revolver tucked in her skirt band when she went to the barn. Then came the storm. It rolled in from the west, thick and black as judgment. The wind howled through the lowlands, snapping branches and scattering debris across the pasture. By the time Daniel returned from the range, lightning was striking close enough to feel through the soles of their boots. They worked together to close the barn, herding the animals inside, stacking feed sacks against the wind. Rain came down in sheets, cold and blinding. Inside, they were soaked and shivering. Daniel lit the hearth while she toweled her hair, both of them laughing, sharp and breathless. "I forgot how damn fast it turns out here," she said, teeth chattering. "You get used to it," he replied, handing her a blanket. As they sat by the fire, something softened. The storm raged outside, but inside there was warmth. The crackle of flame. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was filled with something waiting to be named. He glanced at her, shadows dancing across his face. "You're not what I expected." She looked at him. "Neither are you." He didn't look away this time. "You ever think about leaving? Before?" "Yes. And now?" She paused, then shrugged. "Now I think about staying." His breath caught just enough for her to hear it. The next morning, the world was drenched in quiet. Trees leaned like tired sentries, and the sky hung low and gray. Daniel saddled up and rode out early. Ellie stayed behind to clean, repair storm damage, and set a pot of stew to simmer. But by noon, he hadn't returned. By 2, the stew boiled dry. By dusk, she'd taken a rifle and ridden out. She followed his usual route past the ridge, down into the ravine near the East Creek. The mud was thick, sucking at her horse's hooves. She spotted the tracks, his and others. Hoof prints she didn't recognize. At the edge of the ravine, she found his hat in the dirt. Her heart stilled. She dismounted, gun ready, and moved slow as breath through the trees. The birds had gone silent. That was a warning. She heard something ahead, groaning. A struggle. She stepped into the clearing and saw him. Daniel, bloodied and tied to a tree, one eye swollen shut. Cutter and 2 men circled him, laughing, searching his coat for valuables. Ellie didn't wait. She stepped out, shotgun raised. "Step back or die." Cutter froze. His men reached for their guns, but she fired first. The blast echoed through the woods, catching one man square in the chest. He felt like a sack of wheat. The second man dove for cover, but she pivoted and shot again, missed but close enough to make him think twice. Cutter raised his hands, eyes wild. "Now hold on." She advanced. "Drop the weapons, or I swear to God, I'll paint this grove with what's left of your brains." He dropped the pistol. She kept the shotgun leveled until the second man threw his revolver into the dirt. Only then did she kneel to untie Daniel, hand steady despite the tremor in her breath. His voice was hoarse. "You came. You're my husband," she said. "Even if it was a strange beginning, I aim to keep it." They rode home slow, Daniel slumped but conscious. Back at the ranch, she cleaned his wounds, boiled water, stitched the cut over his brow with shaking fingers. He didn't speak until she was done. "You should have run," he said. "I did," she replied, binding his arm. "Toward you." He reached out then, rough hand closing over hers. "I don't deserve that kind of loyalty." "You didn't have to. You earned it." For a long time, neither moved. The fire crackled, the wind moaned softly against the shutters, and the weight of what hadn't been said finally cracked open between them. He looked at her like he hadn't really seen her before. "You scared me," he admitted. "I scare myself," she said. But they didn't look away. That night, he didn't sleep in the hallway. And when morning came, he was still there, hand resting on hers, as the sun warmed the edges of a life finally beginning to bloom. Outside, the land waited, dangerous, beautiful, wild as ever. But inside the ranch house, 2 souls stood not as strangers, but as something stronger, something that could weather more than storms. And they knew, without needing to say it, that the fight wasn't over. Cutter had lived. There would be more trouble, but they would face it together now. Together, they were something fierce. The prairie held its breath. For days after the ambush, the air around the Briggs ranch was tight with silence, like the land itself waited for something to break. Daniel's bruises darkened, then faded. The stitches above his brow healed slow. But in his eyes, a storm still brewed, quiet, unreadable, the kind that didn't blow over easy. Ellie didn't press him. She split firewood, hauled water, cooked meals without comment. But every time she stepped outside, her hand drifted to the pistol at her waist. She knew better than to trust silence out here. Cutter wasn't dead, and a man like that didn't forget being outdrawn by a woman. One morning, Daniel stood at the fence line, watching the sky go yellow with dust. He hadn't slept much. Ellie could tell by the tight set of his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. "They'll come again," he said, without turning. She stepped beside him. "You sure? They got shamed. I'd rather they just slink off, but Cutter's got too much pride. He won't take a beating and walk away. Then we meet them ready." He looked at her then, a long, measuring look. You think you can kill again? I don't think I can, she said. That night, they made preparations. Daniel dug out old traps from the shed, the kind rustlers hated most, silent ones, made to maim or cripple when stepped wrong. Ellie strung wire across the northern ridge, hung tin plates on the brush so they'd rattle at the slightest motion. They took turns sleeping in shifts. For 3 nights, nothing happened. On the 4th, it began. She heard the horses first, quiet, but not quiet enough. She shook Daniel awake, already gripping her shotgun. He rolled from the cot, grabbed his rifle, and moved to the front window. Outside, under the cover of moonless dark, 3 shapes crept through the pasture. One stopped, bent low to cut a wire. Then the trap snapped. A scream tore through the silence. Ellie was already at the door, Daniel behind her. She threw it open, fired into the dark. One figure fell. Another bolted. The third, Cutter, fired back, the flash lighting his twisted face for a heartbeat. Daniel took a shot to the shoulder. He stumbled but stayed upright, teeth clenched, blood already soaking his sleeve. Ellie pulled him back inside, slammed the door. Stay down, he grunted, pressing a cloth to the wound. Don't let him circle around. She nodded, reloaded, then ducked low and moved to the side window. Cutter was gone, vanished into the brush. For an hour, they waited. Nothing. Then a voice, mocking, low, called from the dark. You got guts, Mrs. Briggs. I'll give you that. But you ain't got the numbers. Daniel stood, swaying. He's not bluffing. He brought more men this time. How many? Can't say. At least 5. Maybe 6. She looked at him, firelight glinting off her eyes. Then we need to end this. Tonight. He hesitated. Ellie. She shook her head. If we let him dig in, we'll lose. They'll wait for us to slip, and they'll burn the place down around us. Daniel exhaled, long and ragged. You got a plan? She did, and it was a damn desperate one. Under cover of the barn's back wall, she slipped out, silent as winter. Daniel stayed behind, rifle ready, a lantern swinging from the porch, a decoy. She moved through the brush, circling wide to the east. The moon had risen just enough to paint the ground in dull silver, and she used every shadow it gave. She reached the edge of the ridge and spotted them. 5 men, crouched near the tree-line. One smoked a cheroot, careless. 2 had rifles. She took a deep breath, raised her pistol, and fired once, then again. The first man dropped. The others scattered, shouting. She ran, not toward the ranch, but away, drawing them like wolves on scent. They followed, curses rising in the dark. She ducked behind a boulder, reloaded fast. 2 came into view. She fired again. One yelp fell to his knees. The other dove for cover. Then a shot rang from behind. Daniel, perched up high near the barn's loft. His aim was true. One more down. The others broke, panic setting in. Cutter's voice bellowed from the ridge. Fall back. Fall back. But Ellie wasn't finished. She followed the sound of his voice, breath ragged, blood pounding in her ears. She crept up the slope, slow and careful. At the top, she saw him, standing alone, gun in hand, teeth bared in a snarl. She stepped out, leveled her pistol. Drop it, Cutter. He turned, laughed bitter and mean. Should have killed you at the creek. You tried. Failed. You think you're something, don't you? Some frontier heroine with a shotgun and a pretty face. She took a step closer. I'm something worse. I'm the last mistake you'll make. He lunged, fast, reckless. She fired. The shot struck his leg, dropped him to one knee. But he still raised his pistol. Then came Daniel's voice, rough and calm. Don't. Cutter froze. Daniel stood behind him now, bloodied, pale but steady. His rifle aimed at Cutter's heart. She had the right, he said. I'm just here to watch. Cutter's face twisted. You think this ends with me? No, Ellie said. But it starts with you. He made a move, jerky, panicked. She shot him. He dropped, this time for good. Daniel stepped to her side, took her hand without a word. They stood there for a long moment, the wind whispering through the grass, the moon rising over Cutter's still form. By dawn, the bodies were buried. Daniel burned their camp, scattering what little gear remained. Ellie washed the blood from her hands at the creek, watching it swirl like rust into the water. Back at the ranch, silence settled in. Not the fearful kind, but the kind that follows a storm. Daniel's wound took weeks to heal. Ellie managed the ranch in the meantime, driving the cattle with steady hands and sharper eyes. The neighbors heard what happened. Some came to shake Daniel's hand, others to offer Ellie work, praise, and one fool even proposed marriage. She laughed in his face. Daniel watched her ride in from the field one afternoon, sun at her back, dust on her dress, and thought, not for the first time, that he hadn't saved her that day at the station. She had saved him, again and again, in ways too quiet to name. That night, over stew and coffee, he cleared his throat. "You ever wonder what comes next?" She glanced up. "What do you mean?" "I mean this. Us. This place. It used to feel like something I was holding on to too tight. Now I'm not sure I'd want it without you in it." She stared at him, the fire catching the shine in her eyes. "I stopped wondering a while ago," she said. "I think we already found it." He reached for her hand, calloused fingers lacing with hers. Outside, the prairie stretched out, vast, wild, and untamed. There would be more hard seasons, more men with guns and greed, more storms rolling in without warning. But there was strength in them now, forged in fire, blood, and choice. Two souls, once broken, now bound not by need, but by will. The frontier was still a land of loss, but it was also one of beginnings, and this was theirs.